It's nearly 4 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. February 12th, the Metropolitan Council. Good afternoon, everyone. I am thrilled to call this to order with new nameplates. Now I can read, and I don't have to squint, and I know everybody's name. The first order is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the amended?
So moved, Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And now going back to actually approve the agenda. So is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion's approved. Now we are on to the consent. No, we're not. We're going to actually invite any interested persons to address the council on matters not on the agenda. Is there anybody who's signed up?
No.
Public comments? No? All right. Then we're on to the business section. And at this point, we have a number of items on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. On to the standing committees. So first, the Community Development Meeting, Councilmember Lilligren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Community Development Committee just brings one item forward for consideration tonight. It's the approval of the Linwood Township 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The plan proposes an adjustment to the township's population forecast to account for an updated starting point of existing households, and the township is expected to only accommodate an addition of 100 households through 2040, an additional 100 jobs. The council staff finds that the 2040 plan conforms to regional systems plans, is consistent with council policies with the proposed changes to the forecast, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent and effective jurisdictions. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. Authorize the City of Linwood Township to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, to revise the town's forecast upwards as shown in Table 1 of the attached review record, and advise the township that prior to the final adoption of their plan, they must replace the transportation analysis zone table on the plan page 77 with a table provided by council staff to reflect the township's revised forecasts.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I believe there may be somebody in the audience from Linwood Township who's here. Yeah. Mike? Yes. Yeah, Mike Jungbauer from Linwood Township is here. So.
Oh, very nice. I'd like to recognize you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Vinton. The next is the report from the Environment Committee. Councilmember Lindstrom.
I'll take that one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Chair and members. Business item number 2019-68 requests high-strength waste hauling services. Environmental Services provides high-strength waste hauling services to transport concentrated dairy waste from Kemp's to Empire wastewater treatment plant for digestion, and the current hauling contract is almost fully utilized. These services are required by the Industrial Pretreatment Service Contract between the Met Council and Kemp's. That's part of our Industrial Pretreatment Incentive Program. We received 3 bids, and Schlumpka Vac Truck Services was determined to be the lowest responsive bidder. So, Mr. Chair and members, I move that the Met Council authorize execution of contract 19P371 with Schlumpka Vac Truck Services, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $2 million for a period of 5 years for hauling high-strength waste from Kemp's, located in Farmington, to the Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant for digestion.
Second?
Thank you. This is how it's supposed to work, I understand, right? This
Yeah.
system. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And we received a fascinating report at the Environment Committee yesterday. This is a part of a pilot program called IPIP, this industrial pretreatment incentive program where we work with companies to pre-treat, or they actually pre-treat some of their really nasty waste before it gets to our wastewater treatment plant. And as part of that program, then we agree to actually haul it for them. But it's a fascinating program, and I think the council as a whole would like to learn more about our agreement with Kemp's, and then, so Kemp's, of course, in the dairy industry, and then Michael's Foods, also in the southern part of the metro area, and they are in the potato processing
Right.
industry. Yeah,
Well, thank
it's
you.
very innovative. I find it really interesting.
I think it helps our system as well as helps the individual businesses.
Exactly right.
Chief Counsel, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify, I believe it's a business item 2020-68, not 2019-68. So just want to make sure you are all on the same page that that's the business item that you're talking about.
So let the record show it's clarified.
Thank
you. You don't want to be proving something else. All right, perfect. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We're now on to the transportation. Noting that there is management is only a report in the consent agenda, so there's no action required. Going on to the Transportation Committee, Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2020-35 is related to the Phase 2 limited notice to proceed for the Gold Line Engineering Services consultant Kimley Horn and Associates. Contract 17P058 was executed on January 26, 2018, which covers 4 phases of work for Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Project Engineering Services through December 31st, 2024. Prior to the second phase of work for advanced design, the contract requires Metropolitan Council authorization following a favorable Federal Transit Administration environmental decision on the project. The FTA issued this decision, a finding of no significant impact, on January 17, 2020, and the project has been cleared to continue design activities. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize a notice to proceed for Phase 2 of Professional Services Contract 17P058 with Kimley Horn and Associates for the Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Project in an amount not to exceed $8,100,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion has passed. Now on to the joint report of Environment and Community Development Committees. Councilmember Lilligren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The item before us is 2020-17, was heard in both Community Development and Environment Committees. It is the approval of the Maple Grove 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The plan proposes an adjustment to the city's sewer serviced forecast for population and households. Between 2020 and 2040, the city is expected to grow by nearly 19,000 residents, 6,500 households, and 8,600 jobs. Council staff finds that the 2040 plan conforms to regional systems plans, is consistent with council policies and proposed changes to the forecast, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. From the Community Development Committee, authorize the City of Maple Grove to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, revise the city's sewer service forecasts upward for population and households as shown in Table 2 of the attached review record, and also advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for surface water management, land use, and water supply. And from the Environment Committee, approve the City of Maple Grove's comprehensive sewer plan.
Lovely. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
prior to the vote, I just want to thank the City of Maple Grove. I don't know if anyone's here in the audience, but I know they work very closely with our team, and through community development, we acknowledge that. So as representing, it's one of my cities in my district, always enjoy working with them. They've got a great team and leadership.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, and it's always well noted when our own council members are close to those communities. Any more discussion, questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is passed. So now we're moving on to 3 business items on the agenda addressing appointments to the Metropolitan Council advisory committees. Items 2020-65, 2020-66, and 2020-67. We've had as many as 21 openings on these advisory committees due to expirations and vacancies. That's the Transportation Advisory Board, very important, all of them. Transportation Advisory Accessibility Committee and the Equity Advisory Committee. So I need to remind this council, I know you all appreciate the hard work that these advisory committees do and how they and their members are really offering a lot of valuable insights for the Metropolitan Council. So it's really helpful to have engaged citizens. We've reached out through our partner organizations, community organizations, council members, council administration, and we kind of did a wide reach, and we had as many as 60 applications for these 21 places, and that is actually a great testimony that citizens are taking this work seriously, and I know as council members we're part of each committee, so that it's really really helpful. Each advisory committee has its own nominating committee with council members, and in some cases some of the committee members. And so I really want to thank Councilmember Barber, Cummings, Lee, Bento, Zeron, and Gonzalez. I know that you worked hard on that process. It's a huge lift. And woe be to a chairman who does not take that advice seriously, because I know he really spent some time interviewing and reviewing and looking at the work. So with your permission, I would entertain a motion for all 3 committees in these nominations for my appointment, and if there is no objection, maybe there's a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Good. Any discussion? Yes, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say big kudos to the staff, especially Katie Driscoll, who helps staff these nominating committees, and she was here with us through 9-10 p.m. As long as we needed to deliberate. So thanks to Katie and to the administration for providing staff support.
Good. Thank you. Councilmember Cummings.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I just want to point out, Councilmember Chambliss was also on the committee.
That's okay.
And again, my thanks as well. It's a huge thing to pull this together, and the quality of the applicants was just amazing. It was so interesting, and it makes for such a difficult choice, but it really does reflect, I think, the interest in public service, and it was really a rewarding project to be involved in. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank everybody. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The motion has carried. Now we are into an information item. Very timely. I really invite Wes Kustra, Chief Rizal, and Judge Shetton to come forward. We think that this is an issue about transit safety that is real time. I think all of you might have received some notice of not only a press briefing we had today at 12:30, but what we anticipate will be an interesting legislative hearing tomorrow at the House Committee. And honestly, I think that it is a great tribute to our staff to kind of mobilize and be able to communicate the efforts that we have been making, those that we have set in motion, and those that we would like to do. And it is a complicated issue before it. I'll give you more of my thoughts, but I'd be interested in yours. This relates to the nuances of homelessness. It's not a simple issue of good guy, bad gal. It's kind of an issue where sometimes some of our people in the trains, in our buses, might be the most vulnerable victims, and then they might be the perpetrators of crimes due to mental illness and drug addiction. But also, we have just petty crimes, and so we're actually have to kind of lean into this issue. And I think we're prepared to go even farther. But I will have to say, just as an overriding comment, I have been out publicly today and in several locations saying that we as a council are standing for a higher standard, and that we find it the unsafe kind of atmosphere to be unacceptable, and that we are going to do whatever we need to do to make our transit system welcoming, comfortable, and available to all citizens. And yet we have to be mindful of the role we play in so many different areas. So I think it's a really tricky, and I think it's helpful for us to kind of get a briefing about the issue, about what we did today, what we're planning to do tomorrow, and then of course the weeks and months and years ahead. But great. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming. Wes, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm going to provide the information we provided at the press conference today, and you're a different audience. Obviously, you know some of this information already, but I found it helpful even to myself to kind of see it all together, what we've been doing, where we're heading, and so I apologize. Some of you know some of this, some of you know it more, are more acquainted than others of what we've been doing and what we're going to do. But again, I found it helpful to put it all in one place and to be able to articulate to the public, which we really haven't done in prior to this. As the chair has mentioned, it is a complicated issue. We know that crime is rising on our services, that the Part 1 crimes per 100,000 have doubled since 2015. We're seeing similar rises in crime in communities, and we're part of those communities, and it spills into our services. I also want to, again, and this is a little redundant, but I want to differentiate, or at least differentiate when we're trying to address crime versus trying to address people who are using transit shelter. We know the difference. I want to assure you that we know the difference. I will tell you that our public doesn't always know the difference. And when they see crime and they see people using transit shelter and they see part of that being a demonstration of some serious mental illness or chemical addiction, all those things get kind of pulled together, whether we like it or not, and into a I don't feel safe on our service. And so I want you to know that we understand the differences and the challenges of each one of those. That we understand that we shouldn't converge those, but to our customer, they get converged, and it gets summed up into a I don't feel safe here. So, we expect people to feel safe, comfortable, and welcome on our trains and buses, and I expect that. I want to be clear about that. My leadership team expects that. Chief Frizzell expects that. And all of Metro Transit staff expect that. We expect that not only for our customers, we expect that for our operators and our staff. It's important to us. Providing a safe and welcoming transit environment must be and is our top priority. And I will say that since becoming general manager about 1 year ago, I've allocated more time and resources to improving the conditions and safety on our light rail service than any other single issue we have. It's deserved that time and attention. We have real significant challenges in the communities we serve, as I said, that spill into transit service, the transit services environment. Crime is increasing in the communities where we provide service. Unsheltered homelessness is increasing in the communities where we provide service. And that means that the presence of crime and homelessness is increasing on transit because we are a community service. Our ridership represents the community in every way. So providing a safe reliable community transit service, one that is vital to the mobility of our riders and the mobility of our communities and to our region's economy, is both transit's tremendous value and it's transit's tremendous challenge. So we take these issues seriously. We have been taking these issues seriously. And I want to go over a few things that we've already done that you may be aware of, but I want to put them together. In 2019, we made a number of investments to address the conditions and safety of our services. We invested to improve the upkeep of our rail cars and transit facilities. We have increased our rail car cleaning staff by 8-fold. That means that today, and I'll tell you, there was one full-time position for cleaning rail cars when I came in, and so when I say by 8-fold, we have 8 people. And now we have our rail cars cleaned when they reached the depot, when they reached at the end of each run, when they reached the depot, when they reached Target Field, and when they reached Mall of America. We've also added 16, and we still receive some complaints because things happen between Mall of America and Target Field, and between the depot and Target Field, that we may not get to until they arrive at the end of the run. But we've also added 16 staff to clean platforms and maintain our service facilities. And overall complaints about upkeep and maintenance of our light rail have been reduced by half. We've seen that in the looking at the data of the complaints that we receive. So we've had some success there, and we need to continue to work on those issues. I think part of this, I'll step aside and say, we're trying to, both in cleaning and both in police oversight and how we approach fair collection and review, is establishing that light rail is a regulated environment. And I think I say regulated environment in the best sense of the term. When people are sharing space with other people they don't know, they want to feel like they're in a regulated environment. That's just human nature. And I think we're trying to do a better job of showing that the environment that they're in on light rail is a reasonably regulated environment where people can, again, feel safe and welcome. We've increased resources dedicated to our homeless action team to address the growing issue of transit being used as a homeless shelter. We've partnered with the council's HRA, as you know, and more than 100 people who were previously using transit as shelter have been placed in an actual home. Not a shelter, but a home. We have also reached agreements with Ramsey County and Catholic Charities to dedicate shelter beds to Metro Transit referrals, for Metro Transit referrals. So we have, I believe, 36 Catholic Charities shelter beds dedicated to Metro Transit for HAT referrals. And I can't remember the number of shelter beds. I apologize. I have 20 comes to mind, but I'm not going to commit to that, of the Ramsey County shelter facility that are dedicated to Metro Transit referrals. In fact, our HAT team reports that often we have available shelter beds, and individuals who are homeless are choosing to stay in the trains instead. Because they may feel safer in the trains, that they may have certain possessions that they can't bring with them to shelters that they or pets that they can't bring with them to shelters, that they would prefer the train over the shelter bed availability. That's a problem for us because transit's not a good shelter. I spoke to you about this extensively in the past. It doesn't provide dignity to the people who need shelter. We don't have running water. We don't have restrooms. We need to provide. They need to be provided service. We don't have chemical or mental health services available. These are individuals that have service needs by and large, and we're not capable of providing them. So what we're trying to do is everything that we're capable of, and everything we're capable of is trying to connect them to the people who can provide those services. But we still need social service agencies, and we still need homeless services providers to step up and help us. Sometimes it feels, and I use the term feels purposefully here because I don't necessarily have the facts that back it up. Sometimes it feels that we're being depended on to provide shelter by the service system. That's an overstatement. I'm telling you that as a feeling, but we do need to have more action by the homeless community, by the state legislature. This is a resource issue, and it's a resource issue that we as transit are not able to provide, and we're not capable of providing the services that are needed. We've also, so despite these efforts of placing over 100 people in homes and having the extra shelter beds, the number of unsheltered homeless in our communities continues to grow. So it feels a little bit like we're running in place in that area because we still have a good number of people who are using transit as shelter. In 2019, we also made significant investments to specifically address concerns of security and safety. We added a total of $850,000 of one-time funds to our police department's budget. This is above and beyond their base budget. These funds resulted in more than 10,000 additional police hours. And again, knowing the difference between crime and homelessness and other issues we face, these issues were directed at crime. Again, part one crimes have been increasing. And they were directed specifically at areas based upon our analytics where crime hotspots existed. Examples: Brooklyn Center Transit Center, Chicago Lake, Central Station here in St. Paul, Lake Street Station, I believe Franklin Station were areas that received more attention and more presence from our police force. And then also in 2019, we doubled the number of staff available to receive text for safety contacts so that we could expand the service hours that text for safety was available and that we could improve response times. But our challenges related to homelessness, security, and crime continue into this year, and that was the subject of the hearing the other day. I was not in town to attend it, but I've certainly heard all about it. In 2020, we're adding new resources and effort to what we've already started in 2019. You are well aware that you recently approved installing real-time video cameras in all of our 90-plus rail cars. This will be a significant multiplier of our capacity to monitor light rail services and facilities and improve response time, and in some ways may even help us prevent situations when we see unusual behavior going on before they escalate to what are really considered to be crimes. We've added 2 positions to the homeless action team so that we can do more to connecting people to shelters and homes. Beginning in January, Chief Frizzell, who will talk about this more, changed how police officers are deployed to ensure that more police time is spent on the light rail cars themselves rather than in squad cars. In mid-January, I met with the police chief and provided an additional allocation of $150,000 per month, or $1.8 million for the year over his base budget. This more than doubles the amount that we provided in 2019. And so this funding will provide more than 20,000 additional policing hours that will be targeted for increased presence on light rail service. And this includes increases in both uniformed and plainclothes officer presence, and will target both crime and other code of conduct violations like smoking, possession of alcohol, harassment, loud use of profane language, and other similar behaviors that are clearly in violation of our code of conduct and are issues that our customers raise to us frequently. The funds for this, if you are wondering, are being diverted from savings we're getting from the operator shortage. So this is not long-term effort. This is moving money that we have in our that we are saving in our operator shortage and moving it towards improving our service. At the same time, we are working really hard to solve that shortage. So I want you to be aware that both activity, it's a both and activity. In fact, I got an update on the operator shortage today. I'll just mention that we've now had over 500 applicants since the one-day event, including the one-day event. So that's good news on the operator shortage. Chief Fazell has told me that these resources are sufficient to max out the capacity of his police force. And by that, I mean it assumes that all part-time officers will have the opportunity for full-time hours, and it assumes that our full-time officers can work all the overtime that our officers can reasonably and safely accept. In addition to this, there is a bill at the legislature. We introduced the concept of administrative citations. We've talked about it a few times here before. There is a bill that has now been introduced by Representative Tabke to fund fair ambassadors that would really coincides with our administrative citation concept. It would decriminalize fair evasion. It would allow us to have a more effective and efficient way to monitor fair compliance. Our goal, of course, isn't to issue as many citations as we can. Our goal is fair compliance. If we do things right, we won't be issuing many citations, and having a consistent review and consistent checks of fair compliance, we believe, will lead towards more consistent behavior in terms of paying fares. It is not, as been described, as a week on crime. I will say it's creating a penalty that is more in line with what the evasion is. But it really, we think it is more about more enforcement of fair checks that we're not able to accomplish today. And in fact, the fair checks that we do accomplish, when I spoke with our auditors who were looking at fair checks, they reviewed 150 citations and 3 of them were actually paid. It's not working. It's not working because our county prosecutors have to choose between, do they want to prosecute a fair citation or they want to prosecute a more serious crime. That's one way it doesn't work. It just, for one reason or another, the citations fall through the cracks. So for myself and for others, we believe it's a fair approach for the person committing the offense. But the current approach, even if you like the current approach, isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing anyway. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Fazell, who can give you some more specifics about the deployment changes he's put in place in 2020 and the promising results he's seen in some of the strategies that were employed in January, and how he will target the additional $1.8 million in one-time money allocated for 2020.
Good afternoon, Chair, council members. Just want to put a face on the statistics that you've already had without me replicating the information that you've already received. But we have a very dynamic deployment strategy that's going on, and it's with the full support that I've received, not only from the council, but the GM, and how we utilize those one-time funds to maximize the resources that I currently have available to me. Now, you have to be smart about it with that in regards that we have a very large footprint that we own for the purposes of safety and security. So with that being said, we look at crime trends, patterns, and analysis. You'll hear me say that a lot, where we sit down where all the subject matter experts within the department, as well as outside analysts, to look at the times of day, the locations, the types of crimes, and all those little nuances in order to place all our limited resources in the place that it needs to be. Highlight that by the incident that just occurred a few short days ago, and I'll simply say that we show a lot of empathy and sympathy for the victim who lost their life and the others that witnessed that, including our operators. It's important that we understand that a part of 21st century policing, it dictates that we do that. So as we apply our forces, we take that into consideration. And so with that, again, being said, we put our resources where they need to be. And in that particular instance, we had uniform officers on that particular bus a mere hour or two prior to that incident. So there are gaps in the system. With the crime going up, we try to do our best to place those resources where they need to be. And we have received the one-time monetary sources that have helped us do that thus far to a very effective rate. One instance is we have now more plainclothes officers out there that in January alone, after the implementation of the overtime officers overtime, again, utilizing those funds, citations and contacts went up well over 75% in various different areas, which shows that they're very effective for not only our customer base and communities that we go through to know that we have a police presence on that bus, train, or light rail if they see it or not. And that's something we continue in the future as a part of our dynamic crime mitigation strategies. We've also utilized a considerable amount of overtime to saturate a lot of the complaint-ridden areas over the last couple of months, to include the green line and the blue line. And when you squeeze that proverbial crime balloon, it's going to bubble out somewhere else. So the trick is determining where that was going to project itself in the next instance. We've been able to do that again through our analytics and put resources where they need to be. It's also important to understand that Metro Transit Police Department are the primary security outside perimeter for every major sporting event in the downtown areas of St. Paul and Minneapolis, to include U.S. Bank, all the way over now to Alina Stadium for soccer, the University of Minnesota. And if the Twins go deep in the season, we also have to provide for the thousands that go there. And sometimes it's simultaneous. So I say that just so you can understand the complexities of our deployment strategies. In my first 6 months, I have totally redeployed our officers in a different configuration, meaning we now own zones or beats with specified officers that is your beat. And they're centered around some of our problematic platforms that were illustrated earlier. So you get to see the people that are riding it every day. They get to know you, and I've witnessed it myself where they're now calling each other by their first names, which is that first part, again, of 21st century policing, where you get to know your people, they get to know you, and thus you have a positive effect, specifically with those that would come on to try to target our customers and the community for their own ill-gotten gills. So a very effective across the board with that. We will continue. Also, we're looking at, we've established a full-time investigative unit that we did not have prior to my tenure. So we had 22 different individuals, seasoned officers apply, and now we have full-time investigators that are getting schooled up, receiving the experience, and we are actually investigating at least 2 of the homicides that have occurred. And I will say one of which was an overdose, and the other one was not charged to it because it was deemed self-defense. So Minneapolis has been working very close proximity with us in partnership. All the other agencies have stepped up when we've asked them to do whatever it needs to do through mutual aid agreements, and we're exploring that even further to make sure that we have partnerships throughout the region with the other municipalities to assist. With that being said, we now have $150,000 that will be allocated in one-time funds to expand that program. However, the gaps remain where I don't allow my officers to work an excessive amount of overtime due to some of the reasons that are pretty clear. You want them sharp. You want to make sure that they're not doing a detriment to themselves by overworking, and they're out there providing the guardianship and law enforcement that we need in regards to that. We're looking at partnering with technology where our real-time information center will have, again, seasoned officers watching all of the light rail cars simultaneously through different screens. If we do go to that model of ambassador or CSOs or those additional eyes and ears that will be on the vehicles in an official uniform to give us that additional presence, they will be able to call not only if they run themselves into a situation that kind of gets over their skill level, but it allows officers who are now freed up to respond in a more precise manner. But that also generating probable cause, so we know exactly that the Martian with the yellow boots on this train has the gun in the backpack, and we know exactly how to address that. And so we'll be tying those two as a part of pieces to this puzzle of of crime mitigation deployment. The next piece is with, again, the investigators, where we're going to step up our ability to investigate operator assault, to show that we have just as much concern and compassion for the operators on our vehicles as we do our community and customers. And so being able to investigate their concerns is now a reality. And that unit has been stood up, say, the last 90 days or so, and they're gaining experience as we speak. So with that all being said, we have a multifaceted strategy that's been ongoing, not just because of recent events, but because we had the foresight and the leadership and the funding to allow us to start to spread our crime mitigation efforts throughout the system and to make sure that we can grow it in a responsible manner to help ensure the security and safety of all our customers, our operators, and in the communities in which we go through.
Thank you, Chief. Judd, do you have
Well, sure. I just have some hopefully brief comments. Wes did a pretty good job of explaining the bill at the legislature. I would just like to make sure I thank Councilmember Barber as well for that. We've been working with her quite a bit here, along with Representative Papke from Shakopee's Vice Chair of the Transportation Committee, who is bringing forward this bill. As Wes mentioned, we kind of proposed this idea later in the session last year. We were able to work with the representative in order to tighten it up and actually come forward with a real plan, which we're excited about. It's going to be heard tomorrow afternoon in the House Transportation Finance Committee. Prior to that, Chair Zelli is going to be able to address the committee along with Wes and Chief Frizzell about the same things that we're sharing with you here today. I think it's really important. We didn't get that opportunity to have them make those comments last Wednesday at the Legislative Committee hearing, so I think it's only fair that we do get that opportunity, and so I'm thankful for that. But one of the big takeaways here that I want everybody to remember is that I know that our folks are committed to this. There is no doubt. We've had these conversations on the daily. What I told the Legislative Commission last week is, I appreciate their concern about this as well, but we can't do some of this without their help. We need the legislature to allow us to reduce the penalty so we can have someone other than a sworn officer write that administrative ticket to allow us then to get all the additional benefits of having that presence on our trains, on our buses, on our system. That is a big benefit that I think we all recognize that will help our system, but in order to have those ambassadors be able to issue that ticket, we need the legislature to allow us to let them write it. The other piece of that is we need to make sure that we can afford this. One of the things that we've talked about here is that we're using one-time money to do this. And so we're committed to doing this, but we also need to make sure that the legislature understands that, we are getting by with money that is coming through because of the driver shortage. And this is not a budget year. And so if we want to be able to do this sustainably, we need to make sure that their commitment is there as well. And so we're going to have, I think, a real good conversation with them tomorrow. We are working on a Senate author for this bill as well. And I know that we are receiving broad support from the business community on this. I know that 2 chambers are going to show up tomorrow in support of this, and so we really appreciate that as well. But I think the approach on this is good, and I just want the takeaway to be from the legislature that we need their help in order to achieve both of those things. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have about how this is going to shake out, but it's a long process.
I especially kind of want to highlight the commitment and the imaginations of our Metro Transit and Met Council staff. They've really been stepping up, and a lot of this has started some time ago, but it's really coming to fruition now. So great work, and also all the work that we all as council members are ambassadors for this idea that we have a high standard for safety as our highest priority in all respects, including our employees. Also, shout out to Councilmember Barber, who's there today and discusses this a lot on the Transportation Committee. Councilmember Chambliss, you had a
Oh, yes, thank you. I agree. I want to thank the staff, Chair, Councilmember Barber, for the support of decriminalizing the fare evasions. Also, understanding the whole picture in terms of the safety issue and what it leads to. It's very important for you to speak on that to our legislature and that they understand that if safety is number one, then we need to invest in safety and prevention of crime. So that's the main thing that I wanted to say. We cannot police our way out of our safety issues. Our homelessness problem is a result of a lot of complex issues that need to be addressed, and we need to invest in those. Mental illness, social ills are caused by things that could be prevented if we invest enough in our people. People are first.
Right, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Oh, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Wes, or Chief, if you, one of you could please say a little bit more about how we can be more innovative about tackling crime issues in areas where the jurisdiction is messy, like Central Station in my district. I get complaints about it all the time, and how are we, it's clearly not a money issue, but how can we be more innovative with working with other partners in making that particular station better?
Well, through the chair, Councilman Lee, I speak almost daily with some of the major police chiefs as we try to deconflict what our officers are doing in and around our platforms and the multiple stations, particularly in and around that area. And sometimes it comes down to who actually has jurisdiction there. The Metro Transit Police Department has jurisdiction, as you know, in 7 counties, but we try to restrict our activities to the Metro Transit properties, because that's our responsibilities to ensure that, like Union Depot per se, is exactly where they need to be. So if we start to see or experience a spike in crime or a particular type of activity there, it gives me the ability after our CompStat meetings to direct our resources there until that crime is mitigated and or we see a very distinctive, articulable mitigation of the issues there. But again, like squeezing that proverbial crime balloon, it's going to pop out somewhere else, and my resources that I have available to me go there. And that's just the sequence of events that we see almost on a daily, weekly basis.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say that I appreciate what has been said here already about the fact that there are no easy solutions to complex problems. And one of the things that I would like to know more is about the causes of the spike in crime that were mentioned here. I seem to recall mentioning it was a 50% increase in crime the last few years. So what are the causes for that increase in crime in the last few years? And the second part of my question would be, what can the Metro Transit and the Met Council do, if anything, to address those root causes?
Through the chair, Councilman Gonzalez, again, that's been articulated here. There's a lot of complex issues out there. We've obviously seen an increase in homelessness, and one of my personal goals is to make sure the predators don't continue to go looking for them. The simple fact of the matter is some of them feel very comfortable and safe on our trains versus the actual shelters themselves. But the predators know where to look, and that's where the guardianship, mentorship piece comes in, where we have to protect them also. There's also a perception of safety out there that we're also working on, and that's been addressed by having a clean environment for them. As the GM spoke to, there's been a multitude or eightfold of actual cleaners that when you walk on there and you have an elimination of smell or garbage or whatever that particular perception is, it triggers that maybe this isn't safe. But by mitigating that, again, we've started getting some very positive comments about what that looks like. And then it takes away, again, the perceptionists. And I like to say that homelessness is not a crime. And so I tell the story where we're doing our fare checks and an individual's taking up 3 chairs, and it's like, well, what are you doing? And they produced 3 tickets that they bought tickets for their bags also. So then that causes those complex issues that we're trying to diffuse. And we've addressed that through the homeless action team. Because as just stated earlier, we don't want to make this a police state. We want to make sure that we're policing with empathy and out there doing the right things for the right reasons. And the way you do that is to be able to come up and think outside the box, as you have said, with undercover officers, overtime, code of conduct, looking at the decriminalization of fare evasions. Those are all very innovative things that are happening with the support of everyone here to try to get those pieces all to fit together for the betterment of that safety perception on the trains themselves. Now, we've already spoke to the 1.8 million that's going to go towards that effort, and we will continue to put that overtime out there to make sure you have the presence on all of our vehicles, the operators feel safe, the communities and our customers feel safe, but there's going to be that limit, and it's the human element. We can only work so much. We could only be in so many different places at the same time, but by leveraging technology, like the real-time information center, we're going to try to direct those resources to where they need to be in a real-time manner, i.e. someone's calling in saying, we got X here, and we work in conjunction with the techs for safety. We work for the person watching the video, and then we bring all those forces to bear. So with that being said, we're trying to be good stewards of the public funds, utilizing the resources that we have, and making sure that we're putting them in the right place at the right time in a timely manner.
Wes, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to add, maybe make another attempt at not answering Councilmember Gonzalez's question. You know, you asked the question about why is there an increase in crime. I wanted just to reflect on an article that was recently I think it was in the Star Tribune about Minneapolis crime stats and the increases in crime there. And if you look at that, there were a lot of the increases were between 20 and I think 80% of crime increases, and those were increases where they took 2019 and compared it to the average of the previous 4 years. So when we talk about our increases, we're not averaging the previous 4 years, so that makes our increases look larger. I imagine our increases are really similar. And by that I'm pointing out that I think what causes crime on transit is that we live in communities where crime is increasing. Now, what causes crime in communities? Why is community crime increasing? Well, I was reading the expert in that article, and that person just said, well, there's lots of reasons. And I guess maybe that's the best we can do here is there seems to be lots of reasons. They also pointed out that sometimes trends, I'm going by what the expert in the article said, sometimes trends are not established in 1 year, that crime fluctuates for whatever reason from year to year, and it's not necessarily dictate a trend. But what we do know is not only is crime increasing on transit, but when our customers see it, when it occurs on transit, there are a number of customers who are seeing it. It's a little bit different than crime that happens in the back alleys or in the city streets where there's not a lot of witnesses. When we have a perpetrator and a victim, we also may have 10 or 15 other people who feel victimized because they just had to watch that happen. And so I think that has a multiplying effect on the real crime problem that we have. And it creates part of this perception that I'm not in a safe environment. I can give people statistics to show why they should feel safe on transit. But it's a fool's errand for me to try to convince people to feel safe with my statistics, I think. So it's a challenge for us. We mentioned the footprint. When we have 900 square miles of transit property, we have 92 rail cars, 850 buses. We have 12,000 bus stops, 1,100 bus shelters. You can go down the list. We have a lot of property to cover. So to suggest that we can be in all those places at once, we can't. But we're trying to be in as many places as we can. And I think the best deterrent of crime, at least I'm hoping the best deterrent of crime, is presence. And whether it be presence, known presence through the video monitoring system, or known presence through the fare citation staff that would be between 30 or 90, wondering if there's presence with the use of plainclothes cops, all that creates a sense of presence. And if we can create a sense of presence, then I'm hoping that we can reduce the extent of crime on our rail system. But there will always be crime in communities, and there will always be crime on our buses and light rail. We're just trying to bend the curve here.
Councilmember Barber, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief comment. I just want to take a moment actually to turn the table and thank all of you guys because Chief Frizzell and your team, General Manager Koister and you and your team, sometimes it's hard to take a look at some of these things and dig into it. You guys really have done that and you've come up with a lot of solutions. I think you have come up with a really good plan to combat the safety concerns on our trains and our buses, and you really are approaching it from a perception or a perspective of not only having people be safe but feel safe, which I think is really critical to the success of our transit system. So I really want to express my appreciation for all that you're doing, and just know that you have our support as you go forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you. I second those statements 110%. A few nitty-gritty questions. So I have a question about expectations for our operators. So I read in the paper, and this is a chance for you to affirm this statement or correct the record, that an operator at the end of the line oftentimes goes through the cars and is expected to remove people from the car. That was a quote to that effect in the paper. Is that an accurate statement or not?
Well, Mr.
Either one of you.
Chair Zelli and Councilmember Lindstrom, we have looked at all the claims that were made in that hearing, and I think that those concerns are real concerns because we have a situation at first of all, let me say that we take every concern of our staff seriously, and some of the concerns that were raised were concerns that have occurred over the last 2 or 3 years. Some concerns were very current. The one that was very current was the concerns that were very current was the issue of emptying the trains when we shut services down at 2 in the morning. We have officers that are available in parts of our lines where that is happening, but haven't been available in other parts of our lines where that is happening. And operations staff and our police staff have got together, and we're going to work very hard to correct that. There's always limitations in terms of the number of people that we have available at those times on those shifts. If officers, for example, are on a situation that is critical, they may not be available to be where they would normally help with something like that. But I think we can do a better job, and we're working about on how to do a better job. I think the larger issue there is how do we better connect our operations with our police department. And I've asked Chief Frizzell and Vince Preligan, who's the Chief Operating Officer, to meet on a weekly basis and to start connecting better, having us as an agency, and I take responsibility for this, connecting better and creating a better connection between the needs of our operators and the needs of our staff, the safety issues around that, with how we can support them with our police work. Because I know Chief Frizzell wants to do that, and sometimes we just have to create the communication forums to do that. I think we're also going to try to get more exposure, more direct conversation between the operators and Chief Frizzell and the other police. And I think that's important for our organization to create that connection. And I don't want to diminish at all anything that was said at that hearing. And I want our message needs to be, because it is, and we take it seriously, and we're taking actions now to try to create a better awareness and a better response to some of these issues. The specific challenge you raise is the challenge of the unsheltered homeless on our using trains as shelter and being prevalent on the trains at closure time and not wanting to move, and a very uncomfortable. So just like it's an uncomfortable situation for our riding customers, it's an uncomfortable situation for our operators, and it's understandable.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate all of the information being brought forward and echo comments from council in support of what you're trying to do. I think maybe I also want to just kind of approach this differently from maybe a governance standpoint for all of us. And again, just from a city background, it's not the same as Met Council, but public safety is a big deal in city world. The chief of police or public safety director usually reported right into a city manager administrator. There was more of a direct line to council. We, at least in my community, would get regular reports from our PD, including an annual report. And that would happen throughout our other departments as well. I think there's an opportunity here too, whether it be through the committee of the whole or some other formation of council engagement in this, to better understand the totality of what you face. We're trying to do it a bit tonight because we're being reactive in a proactive way, if you know what I mean. But this also isn't the setting where council can really dig in, better understand what the plans are now, especially since we've got our great chief, on board, working with us. It really would help for all of us to be engaged in the funding dilemma that we face. We all have relationships, and thank you, Councilmember Barber and others for leading on this. But it would help for all of us, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, to get really better up to speed, because I've heard things, one-time funding, savings from shortages, social service supports that we're not capable of fully performing. That's not sustainable, and that's not a plan. So what is the strategic plan? I'm not saying there isn't one, but how do we loop into that and better dig into what we need to do, and then have a regular cadence of reporting? So we as a council set goals. We have 4 of them, very important, around equity, housing, transportation, environment. I just know too, from my background, public safety was right up there, and maybe that loops into transportation, but transportation as a priority can be different than public safety as a priority. So in my mind, it should be an assumed goal, but when issues like this arise and the community questions, and I too have had community concerned about safety on light rail and asking what council's doing, and I'm new, so I'm trying to figure it out. But I think at some point, just better understanding, what the totality is that we face, dig into it, and then have some kind of regular reporting. So if our goal is in the next year to reduce part 1, part 2, whatever the parts are, crime, or have impacts in fill in the blank XYZ, get the ambassador program up and running. What are our goals on that? How will we measure that? And how can that be reported back to the council, so that if we get other entities, whether it's the press, the legislature, citizens in general, we can put those stats out there and our methods and strategies and work behind it on how we move forward from here. Again, highlighting our fiscal challenges. I'm really excited about the ambassador program. My only, and not that we're going to talk specifically about that, but since it was raised, is, again, I come from a community where CSOs, community service officers, come in line, or reserves come in line with police, so that there's still some level of training and qualifications brought to bear to support the police department. And there's some, how do I want to put this, across the disciplines, measures and methods, so that it's all in alignment with the totality of a public safety goal. So ambassador sounds great, but an ambassador to me, I don't know what that means, and I don't need to know tonight, but I really want these people to be empowered and have a designation where there's training, there's authority, and they also have a lot of what our police officers have when it brings to bear the work that they're doing. And I will say that through our reserve program and CSO program, they were also it was a really great pipeline to awesome officers at some point, because they were there, they knew the players, they had their beat or their district, however you want to call it. And I just want to know more about all of that. Public safety, in addition to many things, as a council member, was a big deal to me, and I'm just seeing it in another way, but there are so many similarities. So my only statement tonight is I support all of this, but I think for us as the governing body, we need to be up to speed in our role so that we can fully support you. And the only other thing I would say is we're setting our budgets. Each division, I would assume, is putting their budgets forward. It rolls up to the administrator. But I want to really fully empower, not that we're not, I don't understand it yet, but making sure that the chief says what he needs and we aren't backing into the what we have to do our job. We should be able to say this is what we need and not what we have available. If resources are limited, that doesn't get the job done. We need to start with what we need And then we, as a council, should prioritize that. And if we, as a council, don't have enough for the totality of the services we provide across the council, then we need to be working with Judd, all of us, with the leadership of our chair, in my humble opinion, to get the job done. Because otherwise we're going to be limping along. And that's not acceptable to the people that work at Met Council. It's not acceptable to the people we serve at Met Council. And it's certainly not acceptable to the vulnerable population out there who rarely have a voice. So with that, I'm very passionate about this, but I think it comes back to governance and structure and how we as Met Council, certainly until we get a handle on this, can track goals, progress, and come and support more fully, and not do it in a setting like this in a reactionary way.
All right, Councilmember Johnson, I'm going to express a sense of appreciation on behalf of all of us, both for your passion, but also a really good point. And I also want to thank Councilmember Barber. A lot of these issues do come before the Transportation Committee. This is a real-time issue, and I think putting it into the perspective of how are we reacting out of a sense of urgency through available resources that are within these departments, and then how do we set up the longer-term goals, which includes the required resources, both personnel, financial, and part of a longer-term plan. And I think that it was safe to say is in process. So stay tuned, but that point is really well taken. Councilmember Lindstrom, I want to get back to a follow-up question you may have had.
Thank you. One of the legislative proposals is to do some sort of a study or an assessment of some sort. And I imagine if that study is looking at our own practices and looking at best practices across the nation, we would be fine with that, supportive of that, as long as the funds to actually do that study, which I imagine would be not insignificant, came along with that bill. Is that an accurate assessment?
Judd, why don't you?
Sure, I can take that. I just wanted to, well, the good news about that bill, it's House Bill 3110, which is Representative Torkelson's bill. I will add that Chair Zelli and I are meeting with Representative Torkelson tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to talk about his bill and kind of what his ideas are related to transit safety. He is a regular rider of transit when he is here. He lives downtown during the session and takes the train up to the Capitol, so he's familiar with the system and he has real concerns. And so what we have said, and I mentioned this at the hearing last Wednesday, is that we are happy to work with anybody who has ideas or approaches that they'd like us to take a look at. One of the things that is included in Representative Torkelson's bill is administrative citations and looking at what we can do related to ambassadors, community service officers, whatever that is. And so to foreshadow just a little bit, I have a feeling the chair and I are going to say, we are happy to work with you on your bill. We will also tell you we think that there's some things that we can do today that we don't need to wait for a study to tell us that they could be effective. And so we're going to call on him to help us pass this legislation and help us move forward. And if they want to take a look at adding barriers and what that costs, how that works, that was one of the items in his proposal to do an internal audit, an independent audit of how we've policed and how we put forward, to deploy our resources. We can certainly have that conversation, but we also realize that there is some urgency to this right now, and we'd like to get moving on the ambassadors and administrative citations approach right away, and we'll continue to have that conversation. But we're not opposing anything, but we have priorities, I guess is maybe the best way to put it.
And I would only add that there are a number of other peer city transit systems that are decriminalizing fare evaders as well as ambassador programs. So this is something we could learn from, and we have at least mentioned to Representative Torkelson's that we're open to studies. We're open to actually new ideas, and we're not pretending that we've got it all figured out. I think we're talking about this as a safety culture is a process of humility and making sure that we have both good ideas coming from all directions, because that's not suggests that we somehow have all the answers, but we know some of the answers, so we want to get moving. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to do a shout out to the HAT team, and Brooke has stepped out of the room, but last Thursday, Councilmember Cummings and I had the opportunity to ride along with two of the HAT team members from 11:30 p.m. until 4 a.m., and I can't remember the last time I stayed up that late. I will tell you that I'm still recovering from the disruption of my sleep patterns, and not so much from a sleeping standpoint, but what I saw has kept me awake and has really brought home what a tough issue we face, our communities face, when it comes to homelessness. And one of the concerns that I have is that the urban area of our region tends to own that issue, and yet those who are homeless and facing the perils of homelessness come from all over our region, all over our state, and other parts of the country. So to the extent that we can get all of the region to really wrap its arms and hearts and heads around homelessness and unsheltered homelessness, it's just crucial. Councilmember Lindgren, you know this issue better than I can ever hope to know it, but in a previous career while working at a downtown church, I would sometimes see people come in with good intentions from greater Minnesota and say, well, we want to feed the poor tonight, or we want to do this. And my inclination was to say, go back home and do it at home. That's where it needs to be done, so that all those issues don't come to the doorstep of downtown St. Paul and downtown Minneapolis. So I started out saying I wanted to commend the HAT team, and I want to do that. They are remarkable people. They bring a lot of passion and wisdom and such sensitivity to their work. It was just heart-wrenching to see what folks are facing in their lives, but it felt good to know that there are members of the Metro Transit Police Department who are a part of helping them find housing at very late hours of the night. And we had an opportunity to visit both safe spaces here in downtown St. Paul as well as YouthLink over in Minneapolis. And it was heartwarming to know that there are places like those places, and granted there are many, many more, that are there for folks regardless of the hour of the day or the condition of the individual. So I wanted to make that comment. The other thing I'd like to comment on is, and this may be showing my age more than anything, but the term ambassador, while it seems friendly, maybe doesn't provide the authority that one would hope it would have for a title. And as we're pushing forward with some transit planning, both with the Gold Line and the Rush Line and Botnow and other parts of the Southwest Light Rail Transit, I think when legislation is being proposed or headlines start grabbing people's attention, the seriousness with which we respond makes a difference in how people react. And I just am a little uncomfortable with the term ambassador. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. I think we need to have a title that demonstrates authority, and ambassador just seems a little bit like the welcome wagon lady from down the street.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time. And maybe we'll skip ahead. Councilmember Cummings, you were there till 4 in the morning. And having the limited time I've spent, you can read about it. You can see pictures. There's nothing like actually experiencing both those that are vulnerable and the incredible personnel we have at the PAD team. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, and I have a couple comments. First of all, Sergeant Blakey, thanks for coming back in the room. You missed all the wonderful things that Councilmember Vento said, but from our it was a profound experience, and I would encourage everyone on the council at some time to take that trip. I think that anyone would be welcome to do it, because as much as we hear statistics and stories and have been working in this arena for a very long time, it's very, very different to witness it firsthand and to experience it, and all of your senses get pulled into that, and it has had a profound effect on me as well. So thank you and your team. And you realize that the people who are using transit as a shelter, yes, it's inappropriate, it's not humane, it's not dignified, it isn't any of those things, and we need to figure that part out. They're also human beings, and the humanity and the care and concern that was demonstrated by the officers that we rode with, as well as others who were there, was really something to witness, and you have done an extraordinary job, and thank you for what you do, because it is an impossible situation, and to see it and experience it. So again, I would urge everybody to do that. Thank you for this presentation. It's really interesting to hear everything in total in kind of one picture, and I think that will be really helpful to kind of carry around with me to reference. I have to echo Councilmember Johnson's comments too, that it would be really, really helpful to be informed on a regular basis on what's going on, what we're doing, what the results are, what we're seeing, what we're anticipating doing, because we all interact in our communities that we represent all the time with different constituencies who have different questions, and it's hard to pull them all up. So, and especially if, as things change, because not everything is going to be a home run, and I think we get that, but what we're doing now isn't working, and we need to do more, and we need to do different, and we need to pull everybody into accepting a piece of this situation and put all those pieces together and figure out how we're going to do it. So I appreciate all of that. I guess one thing that I think is also, again, it's one-time funding, and thankfully we're able to cobble that together to take this initiatives this year, and I think that's really important. However, as to the ongoing, we have to figure that out, and we have got to bring pressure to bear to get funding that we must have to deal with this on an ongoing basis. I mean, in 3 years, practically tomorrow, the Green Line extension is going to go through out to Eden Prairie, and I can tell you that the police departments in those communities there's tremendous anxiety about what this is going to mean to them and their departments and their resources. And we need to recognize, not only do we have a huge problem right now, but our system, as far as it goes right now, is going to be going another 15 miles in a very short order. And we can't wait until that time and then say, oh, well, now we need to do this. So I'm really hoping that our funding sources are going to understand that, appreciate that, and really step up, because we can't do this on a one-time basis. It's just not sustainable. It's unfortunate that we have an officer shortage or an operator shortage. That's very unfortunate. However, if something good can come out of it, it is providing the resources for this one-time situation.
Yep.
That's not okay. That's not sustainable. We have got to get the resources to deal with this correctly. So our public is safe, our operators are safe, and I absolutely 100% behind whatever we need to do as a council to support the efforts that you're taking. And I thank you for everything that you have done and for everything that you're proposing to do, and hope that we can really bring pressure to bear to address this problem. So thank you.
Councilmember Chambliss, did you have a comment?
A lot of you have mentioned what I was going to say, but I want to take personal responsibility for the question that Councilmember Gonzalez asked about what is the cause of crime. And I also want to know how it can be prevented. I think we need to be proactive and learn and understand the answer to that question as leaders on the council, as leaders on staff. And once we do that, we can be advocates to help reduce crime, to help prevent crime, and to help manage it. So, that's the main thing that I want to say is accountability. Let's take accountability as a council.
Right. Point well taken. Councilmember Lee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, if we didn't have full-time investigators until now, how have we been investigating up until now? Were we using part-time staff or outsourcing?
Through the chair, Councilman Lee, they were using what they call career enrichment, where officers would come in for 6 months, then they'd rotate out and take the experience that they learn in their limited investigative experience back to the street. Typically, having been an investigator in another life, we'd receive phone calls from Metropolitan Council Police asking that we pick up the case. We have right of choice by mutual aid agreements where these other agencies can either take the investigation or push back. Well, over the last, I'd say decade, it became traditional to just take the case and move forward. But now that since we've grown, it became a point that they're pushing back now because their resources were limited also, i.e. the other agencies. So we're actually investigating homicides now, and that was unheard of. We're picking up all our criminal sexual conducts, assault, the whole 9 yards. And I found that a good investigator doesn't start getting good until after the first 6 months after they figure out who to call. And then rotating off that point would not be very consistent and or good for our organization as we grow. So we put out an application for full-time investigators. We received well over 22 applications, put them through a rigorous testing and selection process, came up with full-time investigators now that 2 of which are going out to a formal homicide school on the East Coast. Others are going through investigative technique type of deals. Until then, those investigators are shadowing larger homicide detectives, similar to what happened last week, from start to finish. So they can understand how to canvass, how to do all these things that they weren't doing before. So that's just a symptom of growing. We're taking baby steps, but we will come a day where we will be doing all of our investigations for crimes that take place on our platforms and our property.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 things. Number one, following up on what Councilmember Cummings said, I had a conversation last week with a city administrator for one of the communities on the Red Line. And they were talking about that when the line first opened, there was pretty regular Metro Transit presence there, Metro Transit police presence there, but that's kind of dropped off. And I want to make sure that we don't totally ignore the other parts of our system, because they see then an uptick because people figure out, oh, if I don't want to get caught, I can go to these other parts of the system. So I guess I'm asking that it would be good if you communicate regularly with the Eagan Police Department and the Apple Valley Police Department to make sure that we're not just pushing our crime onto the local jurisdictions. So that was number one. And then number 2, I think it's great that we're doing our own investigations now, but I was reading an article not too long ago. They did a kind of a scholarly journal scientific process figuring out what prevents crime from happening in the first place. What are the deterrents? And in this study, they found that it wasn't the severity of the punishment that was a deterrent. It was your likelihood of getting caught and the likelihood that there would actually be any punishment once you get caught. So we're taking care of the investigative part, but city police departments have the city attorney that does prosecution, and then the sheriff's departments have the county attorney, and cities, if it's bad enough, things go to the county attorney. We have an attorney, but we don't do any of that stuff. So I just want to make sure that if we do catch people and we do all the job of investigating them, that then we have the follow through from those other entities in the charging and prosecution of people, so that they're not right back on the street doing the same thing again and victimizing people all over again.
Yes, and that's very astute, because through that investigative procedure, that's absolute must. And so we're in the very infant steps of that, but having a charging attorney, we look through those types of things to take an investigation from getting it assigned all the way through charging. All those pieces have to be in place, because right now we're utilizing other folks' charging attorneys.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Councilmember Lilligren.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for taking the time for this report and having this discussion. It's not just timely, but it's very important. And it's very important to some of our most outward-facing functions within the region. I really want to thank the 3 gentlemen sitting here for their work, personally, and and also just recognize what's going on here, which is very, very different from the way things have been done in the past, and I just appreciate that. And so in my district, I have near South Minneapolis, downtown, and all of North Minneapolis. So they're very dense populations. They're very high transit using populations. My neighborhoods in near South Minneapolis, crime is going up. We're seeing almost all of my neighborhoods in North Minneapolis, crime is going down, actually. And then the central business district, and especially downtown east, the spike has just been incredible. Through downtown east run 2 light rail lines. There are multiple light rail stations. So this is an issue that I'm engaged in pretty much daily. And I really can't believe how many conversations I've had lately that are about safety that end up being about unsheltered homelessness. And I think it's given us an opportunity to sort of start to differentiate. And like we've heard tonight, it's not illegal to be unsheltered. And there are definite crime and safety issues, especially within our transit system. And I just want to commend both Chief Frizzell and Director Koistra for acknowledging that and lifting that up and starting to get much more surgical in our approaches to both those issues. And Wes, you said earlier about within the unsheltered homelessness issues that it's a resource issue, and it is a resource issue. And I would also lift up that it's a systemic issue, and that we don't have a system to really address the issues that contribute to unsheltered homelessness. We're trying to build it, and I really commend the work of Met Council, of Metro Transit, for being willing to step into that space aggressively and try to figure out how to, within our authorities, within our resources, to really do things differently. And I would add my thanks to the HAT team and the work that they're doing. I get to see the impact of their work all the time, and it's really amazing. And Chief Frizzell, I'm so glad that you are our chief right now, and I will have a question for you in a minute, but it's really exciting to hear what you've done in 6 months on the job to really make us more effective at keeping our workforce safe, our customers, our communities safe. And I'm really excited about this idea of more designated sort of geographic patrol, this beat approach. And I just know from the communities I've represented through my Minneapolis City Council career, we worked together. Beat officers were a primary strategy. The community found them very effective and reassuring to promoting the sense of safety as well as actual safety. And a lot of that had to do with the relationship. When you have an officer that's dedicated to a certain geography, that officer builds relationships not just with the other officers on that beat, but with the community around them. And I know you're a very community focused you take a very community-focused approach to your law enforcement, and so I look forward to seeing what that looks like as we go. And to lift up what Councilmember Vento said about the authority of someone being a community service officer over an ambassador, and I agree with that. And as we go forward, we need to make sure that we're being very aware of how authority gets used. I represent the central business district, so the downtown improvement district. They use ambassadors. The idea that someone is kind of friendly to a person in need really helps promote the sense of community and the sense of safety within the central business district. And we know from our own data, the 2015 data, that showed the disparate impacts on differing communities when our fare enforcement, for example, is exercising their authorities. I'll just remind people that African American people were 38% more likely to be cited on the first fare evasion than a white person. A Native American person was 93% more likely to be cited on a first offense. And we are miles beyond that, and just seeing the way that we're responding now shows that we're much more sensitive, we're much more aware, and there are risks when we begin too strong of an enforcement approach. I also want to lift up what Councilmember Vento said about the regionalization of our approach toward the issues of unsheltered homelessness. And this is something that we're struggling with as a region, and acknowledging that we need a regional approach. And again, commend my colleagues. I feel like we have stepped into that regional conversation in a big way, sort of staying in our lane, but not really saying this isn't our job, this isn't our responsibility. We don't do that. We're not a social service agency, but saying within our resources, and within our authorities, how can we better support our region in addressing these issues? And what you've done with one-time funds is amazing, and we all know that is not sustainable. And so I look forward to the updates and being informed as we go forward, to being part of that conversation as well. And now, Chief Brazel, my question for you, and again, having experience working together on sort of community-directed policing, and I'm just wondering if there's, in your thinking, in your plans as we go forward, what ideas you might have, or if you're thinking about engaging the communities around where these beats are. And when we know a community approach to policing always amplifies that effect.
And through the chair, Councilman Littlegren, yes, we've worked together a lot over the years, and I think we have a very similar approach to our community-based policing, and that's very key to me. However, here's that nuance. Our beats and communities are centered around buses, trains, and light rail, which makes our communities very mobile. You're familiar with Carol LaFleur. She's one of our outreach workers that are doing that in conjunction with our community engagement teams through Metro Transit as a whole. So we are reaching out. We're trying to make inroads with community leaders in that regards, and that's a process, as you know. However, we do see that by putting officers in those geographical areas where they're on and off the platforms, they're getting to know the people in businesses that frequent our light rail. And the one thing I'm very proud of saying, if you didn't know, our police department, 49% of my department are people of color and women. That's unheard of in the state of Minnesota. It truly reflects the communities in which we serve, and we go through a lot of them. So we want to continue that recruitment effort from those communities to bring on to our department as it starts to expand. In a former life, I designed the Community Service Officer program for another agency to be that feeder system where I see them gaining that police community interaction through day-to-day activities. So one course of action we've discussed, not of course implemented yet, but discussed, is bringing the community service officers over in that role. As you said that, council member, I'm like, yeah, sometimes having that authoritative title sometimes could help in the perception, and that definitely deserves a deeper conversation. But as we start to recruit through the CSO program, which we're doing that for 11 more for my authorized strength of 20, we're going to start to utilize them in different roles, perhaps pairing them up with police officers, giving them that experience. And I can tell you right now, some of our former CSOs were in our last applicant pool. Over 210 people applied for the Metro Transit Police Department in recent months. That is larger than some of the other municipalities' applicant pools put together. So they sense something's happening out here. This is something special, and they want to be a part of it. And I personally interviewed an additional 70 to look at pool of applicants, and a portion of those were CSOs. So my point being, it gives us an opportunity to draw from the communities in which we serve, bring them in through this feeder program, training program, and then promote them eventually to police officers within the department, and keep up the advantage that we have over the other departments with our diversity and our community commitment.
Thank you, Chief. And Councilmember Littlegren, we really appreciate the leadership role you're playing, particularly in the homelessness action group that is really meaningful. And we have one more question, one more comment. Councilmember Fredson.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and, of course, for all your work. Question for the chief or for the general manager, just to follow up on your comments related to the professional sporting events. Could you say more about our response, Metro Transit Police responsibilities as it relates to sporting events, big concerts? What's our responsibility versus what is the local government's responsibility. And I guess where I'm going with this is, I hope that we're not allocating, say, staff and resources to like sporting events at the cost of, say, having folks fully staffed up or adequately addressing issues where crime might be occurring at different locations or at different times. And another question would be, are the venues or the teams at all responsible for helping pay for that service?
Through the chair, council member, our platforms are located at all the major sporting venues. By virtue of that, that becomes our responsibility. To your second question, sport teams are not contributing funds to us, and we're not responsible for doing anything off. I usually give it somewhere 150 to 200 feet off of our property. So we utilize our part-time officers in that responsibility because, again, we couldn't do that with our full-time staffing because the result is if we can't backfill with our part-time officers, we're bringing in other officers that are full-time and on callbacks because we can't ignore the fact that we'll get 50 to 60,000 people through U.S. Bank Stadium on a major event. Even more now, it kind of caught me off guard, is with the soccer. That's a very popular event, and it generates a lot of folks coming through our systems to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, if all those events are happening simultaneously, it becomes quite the challenge. So typically what happens is they'll staff heavy through the precincts or sectors, as say St. Paul, Minneapolis, to take care of the peripheral things, where our primary responsibility is our properties, platforms, and our bus shelters that are in the immediate vicinity of the sporting event. That can be even more prevalent than what you see over at the University of Minnesota during the Iowa-Wisconsin game, or Iowa-Minnesota game, I should say. I'm a Hawkeye.
All right. Council member, you're in trouble. Council member Muse, you got the last word.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. So I just want to thank the chief for your commitment and to inclusion and diversity. That's really very important. We need to maintain that, and you will have our support for while you're trying to really maintain and increase the diversity. But also, I want to highlight and say our chief is one and only few chiefs of color in the state. So let's make sure that he gets all the support that he needs as he's trying to really navigate this difficult situation. So I just want you to know that you have our support. You get your back.
Well, on that note, I just have to reflect that what incredible insight and perspective this council has. So those are wonderful comments and great calls to action. And I think collectively we admire the staff. This is a gnarly and important issue, and we're going to spend more time on it. But I think we have everything here to really bend this curve and reach the goals we need to attain. And I think we have all shown through our body language and words a real commitment to that, and do it in a humane way because this is a human enterprise. So thank you all for presenting, and good luck tomorrow. I'll be with you, and good luck to us all, and we'll have an opportunity to talk more. Is there any report that anybody would like to share at this waiting moment? No, we've talked enough. I think so. General Counsel, any word?
No report.
Regional Minister, would you like a last word? No. Okay. Then I think we're ready to adjourn. I look forward to this conversation continuing. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.